So I'm meeting with Detective Dolsen of the Madison Police Department, and the purpose of this interview is to learn more about what it takes to get into a career in law enforcement and maybe some advice that she has for us. So thank you for meeting with me.
You're welcome, no problem.
I'd like to start off just asking you what sort of education you have that helped you to be successful in this line of work.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's funny. I didn't try. I actually never wanted to be a police officer, and so my education is kind of a different route. I do have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and criminology, but I always thought I was going to go to law school, and so I have that from Ball State University. I grew up in Indiana, and working my way through undergrad, I worked as a resident assistant or resident advisor in residence life, and I think actually of most things I've done in my life, including school and everything. That's probably not what your professor wants to hear, but the education that I got from working as an RA actually has been invaluable in my life. It's a lot of skill building in that job. And then I went on from there in undergrad to get a master's degree in counseling. So I kind of switched gears. Instead of law school, I was really enjoying residence life.
Yeah.
And so I went on and got a graduate assistantship in residence life at UW-Whitewater. So that was my introduction to Wisconsin. And I got my master's degree in counseling. And you can kind of do a couple of different tracks. You can do higher ed or you can do community. And I chose community, which was really interesting from the standpoint of I worked as a domestic violence and sexual assault counselor for a while. Yeah. So really, when you look at my education, it's, and you think about sort of traditionally about policing, it's like, you did what? Sorry about that. We had this thing going on.
I saw actually 3 police cars.
I think they've gotten it under control now, but I wanted to make sure. So anyway, it's interesting when you think about it, but when I look back at my education, I really think it's what you make of it, right? Yeah. When I look back at sort of certainly, so as a graduate assistantship, I worked in housing, and that was a phenomenal training ground as well, as an undergrad, as a graduate assistant. And then I went on and worked as a professional in Washington State as a hall director.
Oh.
And it's a great, all of that is a really great training ground when you consider that, you confront people about their behavior. You talk to people about what they want to do with their lives, about, you help leadership development, community development. And a lot of that actually really rolls in pretty nicely with policing. You don't think about it traditionally, but it actually kind of does. And then in terms of my counseling background, I think the one thing that counseling did for me that in all of the training in various areas of counseling is when you're training to be a counselor, it really helps you develop good assessment skills of people, and then how to question, how to ask good questions, how to be a good listener, and really develop that relationship with someone that I utilize a lot as a detective.
Yeah.
So I think it's looking at your experiences, and then it's trying to see how that fits. I don't know anymore if there's a real bright line, like this is what you really should do to become a police officer. Yeah. I certainly would. Obviously, I make that case, because my path is, I was 30 really before I made the decision to be a police officer. So I had this whole other life.
Yeah.
But a lot of the people we've hired here come from a variety of backgrounds.
Yeah.
And I think at Madison, we value that because it really is about sort of being that cross-section of your community. So I look at education in that way, and what your education does for you. Yeah. It's inside the classroom, it's outside the classroom, and then it's really what you learn from it, what you take from it.
It's almost like it's the informal education is just as important as the formal in the classroom by the books.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you take from it, what you can gain from that, and a lot of people do things outside the classroom that is very valuable.
I think it should still be recording.
Oh, okay.
Just double check. It usually does that. Oh. Oh goodness.
It might be.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, looks like it. Okay.
I'm gonna pause this really quick actually and make it so my screensaver doesn't go.
That was kind of a longer answer than I expected. I apologize.
That's
I
totally
was
fine.
like,
There we are.
there you go.
So I what led to your ultimate decision to get into police work?
You know, it's funny you ask that. I've been talking to a lot of students lately. I mean, kind of in the some of the way that I met you and things. And it's funny. I can't really remember thinking like where that started for me. I was 29. I was living in Washington State, and I was really just at this crossroads where I was trying to decide, what do I want to do? Do I want to continue on in sort of university life, campus life, or do I want to do something else? And I don't remember that moment when like policing sort of became an option.
Yeah.
But for me, it was always about Madison. And I think for me, I don't know if I articulated it really for myself right at that moment, but now looking back at it, I know that I was looking at my younger sister, had been in policing for several years at that point, and she's here now.
Too,
But she was a state trooper in Indiana, and a very different experience. Very few women. I mean, she was working in a 9. They put them into districts or something like that. She was working in like a 9-county area. She's the only female trooper, and not a whole lot of other females or troopers, officers of color in that whole area. Even when you look at county and local agencies.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so it was just a very different way to police. Very much more sort of militaristic, and sort of their policies and procedures and whatnot. So I looked at that type of policing, and I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just very different.
Yeah, takes a different kind of mindset.
Yeah,
personality.
Absolutely. It's just you and I have talked a little bit about that whole idea of there's a lot of different ways to do policing right.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Right? It's just you have to find which one of those ways fit you. Mm-hmm. And so that's essentially what I was kind of going through, is trying to figure out, okay, police work. And I was all sights on Madison.
Yeah.
And I also applied for the Peace Corps, so it just kind of lets you know sort of where I was at my point in my life. And I was fortunate. I was going through this process from 2,200 miles away, which is a little daunting. I had to fly here a few times in different parts of the process, and but somehow I made it, and I think somebody was watching out for me, I guess. Yeah. So, but I don't really remember. When I think about the themes of my life, though, policing makes sense.
Yeah.
When you break down sort of your life in themes of service, of working with people, of sort of being very, community minded.
Yeah.
It fits.
Yeah.
Like when you look at it just by the job itself, from like working with college students versus policing, it looks a little strange.
Yeah.
But when you look at when you break it down as sort of those themes, it fits me, and or even like counseling and and all of that. And it's like, I don't know if this all fits together, but I think when you break it down a little further, it kind of does.
Yeah, you have to like analyze the type of police work that would best fit with your personality.
Yeah.
So like you said, like the state trooper is more militaristic, and then there's like the community.
There's no way. I mean, that would not have been. I was 30 years old, and I was like, I'm not a break you down, rebuild you type of person.
Yeah.
Not at that point in my life. So,
how do you handle the stress and the difficult things you have to deal with?
Sometimes you handle it better than other times. I'll be honest, it depends on what's going on. Patrol is very different than detective work. In patrol, you're battling the elements. It's very cold outside right now. You're battling, depending on what shift you're working. I work I worked night shift my first few years, and I was not very good on night shifts. I've discovered that about myself, and so I found myself getting sick more often.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just
Mm-hmm.
you're fatigued and you come in contact with a lot, germs and and all of that. Um, I I think what has been helpful though, and then so about detective work, there's a lot of anxiety with you are ultimately responsible kind of to where a case goes, and you feel that responsibility for the victims.
Mm-hmm.
You feel that sense of um, wanting to find justice for them, wanting to find something for them,
Of course.
and you're battling a lot of different elements in that, and it's stressful. In a lot of cases, you have a lot of cases, a lot of work, and then depending on what type of cases, obviously, I think I've had some moments where I've worked on some homicides that were very difficult, particularly when children were involved, and then some cases where children were hurt badly, like sexual assault cases and things. I just had a case, like a case I'd been working on for over 2 years, wrap up in May, and that was very, very difficult. And I think so. Depending, you have to be aware of yourself. I mean, when you lose sight of kind of how you're feeling and what you're doing, I tend to when I go home, I don't think about work. I don't check my email. That's a big thing. I don't check my email. I leave it at work. I am very involved with my family and talking to them, and I have a good support network. We end up talking about it because my sister is one of my closest friends, and then some of my other close friends are also police officers. But we also try to talk about other things and have lives outside of work, and try to be mindful of that.
And prevent the job from taking over all aspects of your life.
Yeah, and it really can. I feel like I'm on a little bit more normal shift now, and that definitely helps. But there's really compelling research out there about what police work does to people in terms of your sort of your heightened awareness. And so for you to be, in this heightened awareness and then only have a couple of days, a few days off, like you can't really get your, like physiological research about really what your body goes through. So really can control that as much. It's interesting that the research, and we've gone through that, and it's not. And we have a department that we've gone through in services, talking about those types of things, talking about the anxiety and what do you do with that? And recognition is huge. If you don't realize what's happening to you, I think that's what they say, that's the first step. So I feel fortunate in the department I work for. I was a little bit older when I started. I think that makes a difference for me personally. And then I try to stay mindful about, what's happening with me at any given point. But it's not easy. Health and wellness is huge. Eating healthy, exercising, if not for your cardio, but just to release stress. You know what I mean? Just to just to sweat for a while or whatever, and things like that. That's being mindful of that too. So it all kind of plays a part. So.
In just bringing everything together, what would you say is your favorite part of police work and the most rewarding aspect of the work that you do? I'm sure it's probably difficult to pick.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, if I've learned anything, justice for people is elusive. It's not easy to get. So my overall viewpoint of what I can do for victims has changed. And I think it's evolved and matured as I have matured within this field, is that, a lot of times you think, I mean, unless you get a conviction, there's no justice. And sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes while maybe a case won't even be charged out, but I will spend extra time with people, listening to them, talking to them, um, giving them some TLC, and sometimes that's all right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've gone to and lost cases with people, and it's devastating. Particularly one case I had with a child victim. She was sexually assaulted as a child, and you know, but even she talked about like sometimes the process is cathartic.
Yeah.
You know, and
just that feeling of closure almost.
Yeah. That she stood up for herself, that
Yeah.
she spoke for herself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, at the time she reported, she was only 15, so she was an adult, but it had happened much earlier in her life, and you know, so all of those moments are good, and I think there are moments, you know, that you can really impact somebody's life, and sometimes you know it, sometimes you don't. I've had somebody come up to me. I arrested him for an OWI. Came up to me in the store, and he was like, I thought, great, here we go.
Yeah.
Right.
Uh-huh.
You know, but he actually thanked me and said, you know, even though I'm not sure, it wasn't so much. It was sort of that moment for him, sort of that
clarity,
rock bottom for him, you know. And we actually had a really good conversation. So there's a lot of moments that I like. I complain about the job periodically, but there's a lot of moments I like. The camaraderie with my coworkers is really special.
Yeah.
There's really no job like policing. I mean, they're firefighters, and I think they have their own issues. You know,
Yeah.
I'm sure they have their own camaraderie, but there's nothing quite like police work, and the camaraderie that you develop with your coworkers is really special too. So I would say that it's very special moments with victims, and with, you know, really trying to help people get through whatever it is they're going through. But then also on the sort of internal side of it, you know, there's something special about, and you know that you only share it with, you know,
the people you work with.
Yeah, with the people you work with. And you know that they are the ones who truly understand.
Yeah.
No matter what anybody else tries, you know, they try, they don't get it, you know, but you share that with these other people, and we've seen it evidenced by, you know, when somebody will go through a hard time, you know, an officer-involved shooting or whatever, we rally like nobody. I mean, we're a little bit like a dysfunctional family, all right? I mean, very much so like a dysfunctional family where, you know, we'll be our own worst critics.
Yeah.
But when something happens, watch out. I mean, there's nobody will rally around you like your police family. Yeah. So, other than your family.
Yeah.
But in terms of really having that in other professions, I don't know. I'm sure there's some that have that, but it's pretty special in policing. And that is cool to be a part of. So, again, another long answer.
Yeah. Yeah. You've given me a lot to think about and look forward to.
Good.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me.
Welcome.
I know you're very
You're
busy.
welcome.
And,
oh, yeah, no problem.
Yeah, every time I talk to you, I get more excited about the future.
Good.
Thank you.
It's a fun job, so some days.